You're all for punishment for pedos, but you don't want the confessional to be used as a spy tool for the government. It's a spy tool now. Yeah, they're spying on us. Well, your phones are spy tools. Your iPhones are spy tools. Your computers are spy tools. Hell, your Xbox Live, if you have one, is probably also a spy tool. There's cameras everywhere you go in this country. You drive down the highway, there's cameras. There's street cameras. There's security cameras. There's cameras everywhere. So I don't see what big of a deal it would be if crimes that are confessed in the confessional would be known to the authorities so that criminals would be caught. And if you're not, man, it's like we're talking about pedophiles here. We're not talking about people who, like, I don't know, they jaywalked one time, but I doubt people would confess that in a confessional. But we're not talking about people who stole a Snickers bar or something like that. We're talking about people who destroy children's lives. And if they make that confession out, which I understand is probably very rare, but if it does happen, that should be reported to the authorities. I don't see why that's such an atrocious thing to ask for. I don't think that's I don't think that that's a very extreme thing to request. Like, hey, this priest said that he molested children in the confessional. Here is his address. Here's where he's living. Go catch that bastard. See, now you want to debate me, John. I asked you to debate me face to face. I would like to see your face, John. I'm not interested in this back and forth cat and mouse bullshit. Because you want to ask me these stupid questions now. What? It's like, now I'm going to get into this argument with you. But I would like to see your face. How would you enforce it? I don't know. We know for a fact that information has been known to the Australian Commission in charge of this, that at times Catholic priests have definitely confided to a confessor, to a priest in the confessional, that they molested children. We know this for a fact. You don't have a computer? They're being caught without using the confessional. Many times they're not caught, or it's not even known that they were molesting children until decades later. That's why. Why do you think it comes out after? Why do you think so many times we've heard this priest molested children in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, but it's just known now in 2020, 2021, 2022? Why do you think that is? Why? Why do you think that is? It's because no one knew. It came later on. So they hide this crap very well. The Catholic Church is very good at hiding crimes. So the Catholic Church needs to be forced in some way to reveal to the authorities who's doing the crimes. Because the higher-ups know who's doing the crimes. They know who's doing the molestation. But they don't want to collaborate. They don't want to cooperate with authorities. I think it's interesting that Anglican boot bishops from their position for not handling allegations of properly. So send UDBA in the confessional. I'm not saying it should be done all the time, but if the Catholic Church is not willing to cooperate with the authorities, it should be forced to. It should be forced to. Why believe me over the saints? Give me one saint that says that pedophilia should be protected in the confessional. Give me one saint that would agree that someone who confesses pedophilia in the confessional should be protected. Give me a saint that says that, because I don't think that the saints dealt with this problem in the past. I honestly don't care if you can't find a saint who says that. It's an issue of morality. Give me one that says it. Give me one that says that it shouldn't be broken for pedophilia. Give me one that says that. You can't find it. The Catholic Church should be forced to cooperate with law enforcement. That is the bottom line. Here's the question that I have, because all you guys are like, how's this going to be enforced? Why aren't the priests telling authorities when these confessions are made? Why aren't the priests? John Juan, if you want to have a debate, you can do it on your phone. Don't hide behind this I don't have a computer nonsense. You can do it behind your phone. You can do it on the phone. I can just put a link on the chat. You can click on it and we're up on here. If the priests are hearing, which they have, if the priests are hearing confessions of pedophilia, why haven't they gone to the authorities? That's the question I have. Why haven't they gone to the authorities? That's the question. Sounds like they don't really give a damn about protecting children. That's the question that I have. Well, how are they going to enforce it? Okay, how are they going to enforce it? That's a legitimate question that we can figure out. But why haven't they actually gone to the authorities upon hearing these confessions? That's the question that I have. Exactly. People are hiding behind the confession to hide crimes. They're like, well, I cannot tell the authorities. I cannot tell the authorities because why not? Don't you want to protect children? Doesn't Jesus say that whoever corrupts these little ones, it is better for them to be thrown into water and drowned with a freaking millstone around their neck? It's about being reasonable, Mr. John Juan. It's about being reasonable here. Why can't you have a normal conversation? Like if I said, hey, somebody confessed this crime to a priest, and it's a serious crime, like murder or child molestation. Yeah, I think we should go to the authorities for that. Not, well, somebody confessed to the crime of, I don't know, they looked at porn or something like that. It's like, well, you don't have to go to the authorities for that, obviously. I'm being reasonable here. But instead of just focusing on the content that I'm specifically talking about, you've now gone to generalities, which is what every single asshole does in any single debate. They always go to generalities. If I bring up a specific, you bring up a generalization. If I bring up a generalization, you would more than likely go to a specific. Like, for example, when I say that priests have in the past confessed to actually molesting children in the confessional. That's a general statement because I haven't brought up any specific priest. What do? Give me one quote. You ask for a specific. Now, if I bring up a specific situation, then you bring up some kind of generalized statement where it's a generalizing statement where it's, well, where does it end? Where does it end? Well, we're not talking about where it ends. We're talking about this specific problem. Don't shift the discussion. Reasonable would be using, how are we going to find them if the freaking institution is hiding them? How are we going to find them if the institution in which the crime was committed is not even cooperating with law enforcement? If a crime happens, let's say a molestation happens in an amusement park, don't you think the amusement park should cooperate with authorities? If a crime happens in a public school, Don't you think the public education system, the board of directors, the whole system, don't you think they should cooperate with authorities? So the church should be forced to cooperate with authorities, which in a way has been taking place, because a lot of the times when you hear about, oh, the church has revealed this list of sex offenders, it's only after the government sticks its boot up the church's ass. Sure, they can be baited. Sure, but it's very difficult, I would say, for law enforcement to catch all of these criminals just by themselves. They would need some kind of cooperation with law enforcement. Now, here's another thing. Or with the Catholic Church. Here's another thing. When I went into the confessional to talk to Mr. Yarbrough, Mr. Yarbrough says, oh, Ted, if you want to meet with me, we can have a discussion about theology or whatever, let me know, which was very weird because he was actually using the confession to lure people, to lure potential victims. That's what Yarbrough was literally doing. He was using the confessional as a means by which to lure potential victims so that he could sexually assault them. That's what Yarbrough was literally doing. He wanted to do the same thing to me. It was very obvious what he wanted to do. And when I reported this, when I talked about this, and I told Church Militant about it, they said, well, did you use the confessional to bait him? Because that would be an abuse of the sacrament. Well, why can't we lure, why can't we bait them in the confessional? Is that also possible? Or you probably would be against that as well. Why are you so against the government finding out if pedophilia was confessed in a confessional? Because those crimes have been confessed in the confessional. Why weren't they reported? The Catholic Church needs to cooperate. The laws of God. Here we go. The laws of God. What's the law of God? Summarize the law of God for me. How does Christ summarize the law of God? How does St. Paul summarize it? How does St. Paul summarize it? I want you to answer me that simple question. How does Jesus Christ summarize it in the New Testament? I'll answer it for you. Love your God and love your neighbor. The law of God is the law of love. Whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. That's not how Christ summarizes the law of God. You're being, John, be real with me here. I had a debate with Andrew Biazad about this very issue, and you're literally bringing up the same exact arguments that Biazad brought up. So I'm thinking, are you sure you're not Andrew Biazad? Are you sure this is not Andrew Biazad behind the screen here? You don't have a computer. I find that highly unlikely. But Christ summarizes, he says the entire law can be summed up into two rules: love your God and love thy neighbor. And if you love thy neighbor, you're going to report pedophiles. So the question I have is, why didn't the church go to authorities and say, these priests told me in confession that they molested children? Why? Why was that not made known to the state? The church has the authority to bind and loose. So why can't it bind and loose this whole rule of the confession so that we can help fight pedophiles? This is Biazad's same arguments. Are you sure I'm not talking to Biazad? Are you sure you're not Andrew, John? Because we all know that John Juan is not a real name. That's not a real name. Come on. I think that the confession of pedophilia, the confession of pedophiles in the confessional that does not see true justice, I think that is a desecration of the sacrament. I would say that hiding behind the seal of confession to protect crimes is also a desecration of the sacrament. So I'm not for desecrating the sacraments. I'm against it. That's why I hold this position so passionately. Also, there have been cases, I'm pretty sure you guys haven't heard this. There have been cases of people going to the confession and telling the priest, hey, I was molested. Children going to the confession, telling the priest, I was molested, and the priest don't do a damn thing about it, even though the victim would tell the priest who molested them. The victim would tell the priest who molested him or her. I don't remember the gender of the confessor. I remember after my whole spiel with Kinsel, going to confession and telling the confessor about Kinsel. Like, there's this priest, he's teaching some pretty disgusting things to people in private. And you know what this guy did? He didn't do a damn thing about it. Didn't do shit. You know what he told me? He says, go to the bishop and tell him. Instead of like, hey, what's this dude's name? Let's get this guy together. Let's go to the authorities. No, go to the bishop. Go to the bishop and just and tell him. Yeah, his number's on the bulletin. Yeah, that's all this guy told me. It's not just granting absolution, it's a matter of justice. The law of God is not made for the just, but for the unjust. Well, they have to go to the authorities. Well, I won't give you absolution until you go to the authorities. No, it should be, I'm not going to give you absolution. What's your name? Okay, we're going to get you. You're going to have to go to jail. Or it's like, well, I'm not going to give you absolution. I need to talk to the bishop. What's your name so I can speak to the bishop about it? Oh, I don't want to give my name. Well, you're going to have to. At that point, you call the cops. You say there's a pedophile in the church. Hold on 1 second, okay? Hold on. Give me 1 second, okay? Hello, officers? Yeah, come get him. Oh, attorney-client privilege also be abolished? We're not talking about an attorney-client privilege because you're guilty. You're innocent until proven guilty, and the attorney has to defend your position. The Catholic priest is not an attorney. The Catholic priest is not there to defend criminals from justice. It's not the same thing. We can talk about whether or not attorneys should be forced to tell the authorities about confessions and things like that. But I'm not going to sit here and play this game where it's like, well, now a priest is the same thing as an attorney. It's the same exact thing. So now we're talking about whether or not they're the same exact thing. No, the attorney is an attorney. He is there to defend his client against whatever sort of accusations that are lodged against them, be they by the state or be they by some someone who accuses that person. The Catholic priest is not an attorney. The Catholic priest is someone who is to be a shepherd for the flock. And being a shepherd for the flock means actually defending the flock from wolves. So in your belief, now the Catholic priest is supposed to be just as slimy as some attorney? Is that what you're actually going to tell me? Is that what you're actually going to tell me? You're actually going to tell me that a Catholic priest needs to be just as slimy and scoundrelly as an attorney? Because I'm not talking about attorneys. I'm talking about the church that was founded by Jesus Christ, which needs to be representative of Christ in the sense that it loves its neighbor. And loving your neighbor also means loving children and hating pedophiles. This is not this Thomas Rees argument is not going to work with me. I swear I'm talking to Andrew Biazad. I swear. Are you sure, Andrew? Are you sure you're not there, buddy? Same arguments. And the attorney is supposed to defend the client. The priest is not supposed to defend pedophiles. I don't know. Is that like part of their... I don't know. The confession is supposed to be between you and the priest and God. And don't you think justice should be... It's like, I don't understand this. It's like the priest can be a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's okay with you. it's okay with you that the priest can be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And he can be a wolf, but as long as he wears the sheep's gown and he goes into this thing called the confessional, he's fine. That's what you're telling me. Yeah, I understand your point, Chopo. That the confessionals would have to be bugged, blah, 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 blah. But let's say, okay. So if a priest is in a diocese, right? Let's say you look at a diocese. Let's say you're an investigator and let's say you're an investigator and you know that there's a priest who's doing some kind of molestation, right? But you're trying to find out who is it. Who is it? And you find out, well, the priest works at this church, and in this particular church, there are 3 or 4 other churches. And we know that these particular priests are people who hear confession, right? And we know for a fact that priests confess to each other. That's part of their procedures, right? That's part of their day. That's part of the thing that they have to do. That's their policy. Priests have to confess to each other. Don't you think those priests should be interrogated? Don't you think those priests should be interrogated? I think they should. It's like, hey, we know that priests confess we know that priests confess their sins to each other, so interrogate the priests. It's like when, oh man, what was his name? There was that serial killer. What was that guy's name? He was a serial killer in Wichita. Dang it, what was his name? But there was a serial killer who was the president of the congregation at the church, and on the side he was a serial killer. And once the police found out that he was that he was working at this church, where did they go? They went to the church and they asked people their questions, and they questioned the church, and they worked with the church, and that church worked with law enforcement. They found out, oh, the president of this congregation is this guy. Oh, that's our guy. Arrest him. And then he was, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but it was proven that he was guilty. So I don't see why it's so difficult that the church simply can work with law enforcement. Be like, yeah, they're looking for this pedophile. And let's say that a priest hears the confession. He's like, you know what? I heard the confession. This guy told me that he molested children. This guy told me that he was a predator. I think I should work with law enforcement. Like, this guy came to the confessional. He told me this. Really, what was his name? Do you know who he was? I don't know why that's so unreasonable for people. Yep. If you want to be martyred for pedophiles, by all means do it. I'm not. If I knew that a guy was molesting children, I'll work with the authorities. Here you go. Here's his name. Here's his address. Yep, he came to the confessional. He told me this crap on this date. Here you go, guys. I'm not going to die for pedophiles. If you want to die for pedophiles and think, oh, I'm dying for Jesus, then you can go ahead and be a moron or just be completely psychotic. Yeah, it needs to be reported. What if the confession is, I am tempted to shoot up my school tomorrow, or I have a hard time keeping myself from my daughter? Where do you draw the line? Again, now we're shifting things. If somebody came and said that, like, I can't, I mean, that person needs to be separated from the kids. Yes, most definitely. Church should work with authorities. Yeah, there's a guy here who's on the verge of molesting his daughter, or is about to, or has been doing it already. Yes, that should be reported to the authorities. Yes, absolutely. Come on. If you want to sit there and ask me all these questions, I'm going to answer these questions to you as honestly as I can. I'm all for any other means of catching them, but the confessional is off limits. Crimes can be heard. Crimes should be caught unless it's said in the confessional. Then that confession should not be used at all in the court of law. Oh no, of course not. You do know that the Australian government has actually found out that priests actually have said these things. There was one priest. What was his name? Ryan. Gregory Ryan, I think his name was, or something like that. This guy molested dozens of children. went to the confessional several times, went to different confessionals several times. Why wasn't this reported after all those years? Why wasn't it reported? They could make it a rule that they don't give absolution and report them. Most reasonable comment so far, or one of the most reasonable. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. That's exactly, the church should change its policy. If you report pedophilia or murder, we will not give you absolution until after you've been reported to the authorities, you've gone through the legal system, and you have been found either innocent or you've been proven guilty. And once we're at that point, then we can talk about absolution. They're okay with priests being accomplices to crimes as long as it's in the confessional. As long as it's okay, guys. But yeah, the church needs to change its policy. Simple as that. It needs to change its policy. Well, if we do that, then they're not going to come to the confessional. Okay, so they should come to the confessional, report, and then run away? Is that what you're saying? Come on. The bottom line is, if you know molestation is happening, it needs to be reported. If you know something, say something. So the martyr saints deserve to die for not breaking the seal of confession? Were the martyr saints dying for protecting pedophiles? That's the question I have for you. These people worship the letter of the law. They don't follow the spirit of the law at all. And this guy's hiding behind his phone right now. He's making Biazad's same arguments. It's almost like it's the same person. I don't know if I would call it, if you want to call it USSR policies, whatever, I don't care. The reason why I am for those policies and for forcing the church to cooperate with the state is because the church isn't changing its policy. The agents of Sodom are still in the ranks of the church. They're all over the damn place. Okay. Hold on. Australia. Priest. And you know what? If you want to consider this persecution, go right ahead. If you want to say that this is going to cause some kind of slippery slope, go right ahead. Guess what? The church deserves it. The church deserves it. This is not the Catholic Church of St. Paul's time, when people were being thrown into the Colosseum for the cause of Jesus Christ. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is a bunch of assholes in the Catholic Church who don't care about children, don't care about children getting molested, and they don't mind hiding criminals. If you're getting persecuted for that, it's hard. I really don't care. Let's see here. Made confessions. Hold on. And if you're saying, and if your whole point is, well, it's not good, how could you enforce it? How could you? There's no way they would know. Well, why isn't there any way they would know unless the church isn't cooperating with the authorities? Secondly, if the government isn't going to know through the confessional, then what are you worried about? Nothing's going to happen. Nothing will happen to the people in the confession. The criminals are going to be hit just as you want them to be. What was his name? It was like Brian Gregory, I think. Yeah, Vincent Gerard Ryan. Vincent Ryan. This guy made his confession. Here's an example. Using 37 children, he made it known to the confessional what he was doing. Confessional people in the confessional didn't do shit about it. Of course, you guys are okay with this. Oh, so hold on. There is a case of pedos actually doing it. Vincent Ryan is one case. No, I think if you confess to a crime in the confessional, it should be made to the authorities. I think it's really that simple. It's not that complicated. Up here it is. The church covered up Father Vincent Ryan's child sex crimes. Here it is. 38 children molested, 38 children, souls destroyed because of this asshole. And you guys are sitting there clamoring about, oh, the confessional. Thousands of children molested. That's fine with you guys. That's okay. That's okay. And have a wolf dressed up as sheep's clothing. He's a sheep, guys. He's okay. He's ordained by God. It's borderline cultic, the way you guys think. It's borderline cultic. What confession? Apostles would have ended pedos, and yeah, exactly. They're acting like the apostles would. Saint Paul would be like, this man molested children in the first century. That's okay with me because he said it in the confessional. Let's see here. Here it is. Convicted pedophile Vincent Ryan confessed to a priest. When Ryan was first arrested in 1995, the church withdrew his faculties, meaning he was no longer able to perform religious duties in public. Blah, blah, blah. They did the same thing to Kinsel. He was still wandering around helping in mass. Ryan told the ABC that he confessed to a priest that he was sexually assaulting children. Ryan said he knew the priest would not break the seal of confession. How could he follow up the seal of confession? What can he do? Said Ryan, who claimed his penance was 3 Hail Marys and a decade of the Rosary. Ryan said he felt better after having been given absolution for his sins.